In 1943, the USDA told American housewives to grow victory gardens and stretch every meal with whatever the backyard could spare. Dandelion greens, fried cornmeal, wilted lettuce dressed in nothing but hot bacon grease. Today, restaurants in Brooklyn charge $18 for the same plate and call it farm to table. Number 14 on this list was something Appalachian grandmothers made from a weed most people poison with Roundup, and nutritionists now say it contains more vitamins than spinach. Number 3 uses a chemical reaction so precise that food scientists at Cornell spent 2 years trying to figure out why it works better than anything a modern kitchen can produce. These 25 side dishes vanished because grocery stores and frozen food companies needed you to forget them. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the 25 forgotten side dishes that disappeared from American tables. Number 25, cucumber and onion salad. Every summer, kitchen in the South and the Midwest had a mason jar sitting in the icebox filled with sliced cucumbers, white onions, and enough white vinegar to pucker your whole face. Your grandmother did not measure. She eyeballed the vinegar, added a pinch of sugar, a crack of black pepper, maybe a splash of cold water to cut the bite. The whole thing cost almost nothing. Cucumbers came from the garden, onions from a 10-pound sack that lasted a month, and vinegar was a pantry staple that never ran out. She would make a fresh batch on Monday, and it would last through Friday, getting sharper and more flavorful with every passing day. Children pulled slices straight from the jar, crunching through them like pickles on a hot July afternoon. The cold, tangy bite cut through the heaviness of fried chicken and cornbread like nothing else could. No one called it a salad course. It was just what sat on the table, as ordinary as salt and pepper. Today we buy fancy, quick pickled vegetables for $6 a jar at Whole Foods, never realizing Grandma had it figured out for the price of tap water and pantry scraps. Number 24, pickled beets. That jar of deep magenta beets sitting in the back of your grandmother's refrigerator was not decoration. It was a side dish that showed up at every holiday table, every potluck, every church supper from Pennsylvania to Ohio. She would boil whole beets until tender, slip the skins off under cold water, slice them into thick rounds, and drop them into a jar of sweetened vinegar with a few whole cloves and a bay leaf. The color would bleed through the liquid like stained glass. A bushel of beets from the garden cost nothing. A few cups of vinegar and sugar cost pennies. The result lasted for weeks in the icebox, and it went with everything. Pork chops, meatloaf, cold ham sandwiches. Grandma knew that the sweetness balanced the salt, the acid cut through the fat, and the color made a plain plate look like someone cared. We lost this when canned beets took over the shelf, and nobody bothered to pickle their own anymore. Number 23rd, macaroni and tomatoes. This was not macaroni and cheese. This was the other macaroni dish, the one Depression-era families survived on when cheese was a luxury. Elbow macaroni boiled until soft, then stirred into a pot of stewed tomatoes with a knob of butter, salt, pepper, and sometimes a spoonful of sugar to tame the acid. The whole pot cost about 15 cents in 1938. It fed 6 people without complaint. The tomatoes broke down into a thick, clingy sauce that coated every noodle, tangy and sweet and warm. Some grandmothers added a strip of bacon. Others stirred in a beaten egg at the end for richness. In Appalachia, this was a main course 3 nights a week. In the Midwest, it sat beside fried chicken as a humble side that nobody questioned. Children scraped their bowls clean. Fathers asked for seconds. And mothers took quiet pride in making something from 2 ingredients that cost almost nothing. Modern cooks have never heard of it. They reach for jarred marinara and dried pasta and think they invented budget cooking. Number 22. Creamed corn. Not the stuff from the Del Monte can. Real creamed corn, the kind your grandmother made by slicing kernels off the cob, then scraping the back of the knife down the bare cob to release the milky starch inside. That starch was the secret. Mixed with butter, a splash of milk, salt, and pepper, it thickened into a rich, sweet, velvety side dish that tasted nothing like the gluey paste from a tin. In August, when corn was 10 cents an ear at the roadside stand, Grandma would cream a dozen ears in one afternoon. The kitchen smelled like summer itself. She would freeze quart bags of it for January, when a taste of August was worth more than gold. The whole process took patience and a sharp knife. Modern cooks skip it entirely because canned creamed corn exists, never knowing that the fresh version is a completely different food. One tastes like the garden, the other tastes like a factory. Number 21. Fried potatoes and onions. Not hash browns, not home fries from a diner. This was the specific dish that appeared into cast iron skillets across America every single night of the week when money was tight. Raw potatoes, sliced thin, layered into a skillet with sliced onions and a few tablespoons of bacon grease or lard. Cooked low and slow with a lid on until the potatoes went tender. Then the lid came off and the heat went up to crisp the edges golden brown. A 10-pound sack of potatoes cost 35 cents during the Depression. Onions were a nickel a pound. Bacon grease was free because it came from yesterday's breakfast. This dish asked nothing and gave everything. That combination of crispy edges, soft centers, and sweet caramelized onions was the taste of making do. It smelled like every grandmother's kitchen at 5 p.m. We replaced it with frozen French fries and microwave potato sides and convinced ourselves we saved time. We did not save flavor. Number 20. Vinegar coleslaw. Before creamy coleslaw became the default, the original was dressed with nothing but vinegar, a little sugar, salt, and pepper. Your grandmother shredded a head of cabbage by hand with a butcher knife, mixed it with grated carrot, and dressed it sharp and tangy. No mayonnaise, no sour cream, just acid and crunch. A head of cabbage cost a nickel. The whole bowl fed 10 people at a church picnic. It sat on the table in the heat for hours without spoiling because there was no dairy to turn. That was the genius of it, practical and delicious. The vinegar wilted the cabbage just enough to make it tender without losing the crunch. This was the coleslaw that sat beside pulled pork at every barbecue in the Carolinas before someone decided mayonnaise was mandatory. Grandma knew better. Number 19. Hush puppies. When your grandmother fried catfish, the leftover cornmeal batter did not go to waste. She would stir in a little chopped onion, maybe a pinch of sugar, and drop spoonfuls into the same hot oil. They puffed into golden, crunchy balls with soft, almost creamy centers. The story goes that cooks threw them to barking dogs to hush them during fish fries, and the name stuck. A bag of cornmeal cost 15 cents and lasted a month. The onion was from the garden. The oil was already hot. These were the definition of waste, nothing cooking, turning leftover batter into the side dish everyone reached for first. Children burned their fingers, grabbing them off the paper towels before they cooled. Today, hush puppies show up at chain restaurants, frozen and reheated. They taste nothing like the ones that came dripping and golden from Grandma's cast iron Dutch oven. Number 18. Stewed tomatoes. When the garden overflowed in August, your grandmother did not let a single tomato rot on the vine. She would blanch them, peel the skins, and stew them down in a heavy pot with butter, sugar, salt, and a pinch of bread torn into pieces to thicken the juice. Some added celery. Others crumbled stale biscuits on top. The result was a warm, sweet, savory side dish that showed up beside everything from meatloaf to pork chops. In canning season, she would put up dozens of quart jars, enough stewed tomatoes to last through March. A bushel of tomatoes from the garden cost nothing but sweat. The bread was yesterday's leftovers. This was cooking that used what you had and wasted what you did not. Modern cooks open a can of diced tomatoes and think it is the same thing. It is not even close. Number 17, biscuits and sawmill gravy, sometimes called biscuits and sawmill sausage gravy. This was not a side dish in the traditional sense. It was the side dish that became the whole meal when money ran out before payday. Your grandmother made biscuits from flour, lard, buttermilk, and a pinch of baking powder. While they baked, she browned a few crumbles of breakfast sausage in the skillet, sprinkled in flour, and stirred in milk until it thickened into a peppery white gravy. The gravy was called sawmill because lumber camp cooks served it to workers who needed calories, not refinement. Split the biscuits, ladle the gravy. A family of 5 ate for less than a quarter. The fat from the sausage flavored everything. The flour thickened it. The milk stretched it. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted. This was survival food that tasted like home. We turned it into a brunch menu item at $14 a plate and forgot that it was invented to feed people who had nothing. Number 16, fried okra. The sound of okra hitting hot oil was the soundtrack of southern summers. Your grandmother sliced fresh okra into rounds, dredged them in cornmeal with salt and pepper, and fried them in batches until golden and crunchy. The cornmeal coating sealed in the moisture and eliminated the sliminess that made children suspicious of okra in any other form. A paper sack of okra from the garden or the farmer's market cost pennies. The cornmeal was already in the pantry. The oil was already in the skillet. This was a side dish that turned a vegetable most kids refused into something they fought over. The crunch was addictive. The inside stayed tender and almost creamy. Grandma would drain them on brown paper bags from the grocery store because paper towels were an expense she did not see the point of. Every bite tasted like summer and cast iron and the particular patience of a woman who knew how to feed a family on next to nothing. Number 15, Succotash. Lima beans and corn cooked together with butter and a splash of cream might sound simple, but this dish kept families fed from the colonies through the Depression era. The name chemi come from the Narragansett word for broken corn, and it had been on American tables longer than America itself. Your grandmother used whatever beans were available, limas, butter beans, even Crowder peas, simmered with fresh-cut corn, a knob of butter, and enough salt to make it sing. In lean times, she stretched it with diced potatoes or turnips. A pot of Succotash cost almost nothing and provided protein, starch, and vegetable in one dish. It was the original complete side. Children ate it without enthusiasm, but without complaint, which was the highest praise a Depression-era side dish could earn. We forgot Succotash when frozen vegetables made mixed combinations seem unnecessary. But no frozen medley has ever matched the sweetness of fresh corn and butter beans cooked together in the same pot. Number 14, poke salad. Here is where things get controversial. Your Appalachian grandmother went out into the fields every spring and picked pokeweed, a plant most modern Americans treat as poison. And she was right to pick it, but she was also right to be careful. Raw pokeweed is toxic. The leaves, stems, and berries contain phytolactotoxin, a compound that can make you violently ill. But Grandma knew the trick that had been passed down for generations. Pick the young leaves before the stems turn red. Boil them in 3 changes of water, pouring off each batch to leach out the toxins. Then, fry the blanched greens in bacon grease with onions and scrambled eggs. The result was poke salad, a free, wild, intensely nutritious side dish that tasted like smoky, earthy spinach with more backbone. Nutritional studies have shown that properly prepared pokeweed contains high levels of vitamin A, vitamin C, and iron, more than spinach, more than kale. This was the original superfood, growing free in every ditch and fence row across the rural South. When families had nothing else in the larder, poke salad kept them fed. We stopped eating it when grocery stores made greens convenient and lawyers made liability frightening. But in the hollows of Appalachia, some grandmothers never stopped picking. Number 13, wilted lettuce salad. Your grandmother did not throw out bacon grease. She poured it hot, right from the skillet, over a bowl of fresh leaf lettuce from the garden. The hot grease wilted the leaves on contact, cooking them just enough to turn them silky while staying bright green. Then, she added a splash of vinegar, a pinch of sugar, salt, pepper, sheer, and sometimes crumbled bits of the bacon itself. The hot dressing sizzled and popped as it hit the cold lettuce. The smell was bacon and vinegar and garden dirt all at once. This was salad before salad meant a plastic clamshell of pre-washed spring mix. A head of lettuce from the garden cost nothing. The bacon grease was a byproduct. The vinegar was a penny a cup. This salad was essentially free, and it tasted better than anything you will find in the prepared food section of any modern grocery store. Number 12, red beans and rice. In New Orleans, Monday meant red beans and rice. Not because anyone chose it. Monday was wash day, and the beans could simmer unattended on the stove while women scrubbed laundry by hand. Your grandmother soaked dried kidney beans overnight, then simmered them all day with a ham bone, onion, celery, bell pepper, and enough cayenne to make your eyes water. The beans broke down into a thick, creamy gravy that clung to every grain of rice. A pound of dried beans cost a dime. A ham bone was free because it came from Sunday's dinner. Rice was 2 cents a pound. This fed a family of 8 for less than 15 cents. Louis Armstrong used to sign his letters as red beans and ricely yours. It was that important to the culture. We have not forgotten red beans entirely, but we have forgotten that it was poor man's food. Now it shows up on restaurant menus at $16 a plate, and the people who invented it could not have afforded to order it. Number 11, fried apples. When the trees in the yard dropped more apples than anyone could eat, your grandmother sliced them thick, left the skins on, and fried them in butter and brown sugar until they went soft and caramelized. A shake of cinnamon, maybe a pinch of nutmeg. That was it. They went beside pork chops, next to biscuits, or straight into a bowl as dessert when nothing else was in the house. The apples were free. The butter was a few cents. The sugar plumb from a 5-pound sack that lasted a month. This was a side dish that doubled as a sweet, a way to use what the land gave you and waste nothing. The smell of butter and cinnamon and cooking apples was the smell of fall itself. Modern apple sides come in plastic tubs from the deli section, pre-sliced and syrupy. They have never seen a cast iron skillet or a grandmother's hands. Number 10, dandelion greens. Before your grandfather sprayed the lawn with chemicals, those yellow flowers were dinner. Your grandmother picked young dandelion leaves in early spring before they turned bitter, washed them in cold water, and served them raw with hot bacon dressing, or wilted them in a pan with garlic and vinegar. A mess of dandelion greens cost absolutely nothing. They grew everywhere, in every yard, along every fence, beside every road. They were packed with more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and more vitamin A than carrots. European immigrants brought the tradition of eating dandelions to America, and for generations it was standard spring fare. We stopped when lawn culture convinced us that a weed-free yard mattered more than free food. Your grandmother would have thought we lost our minds. Number 9. Chow Chow. This tangy, sweet, relish-like condiment was the side dish that sat in a cut glass bowl at the center of every Southern and Appalachian table. Your grandmother chopped up the end of the garden, green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, peppers, whatever needed using before the frost, and pickled the whole mess in vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, bund, and turmeric. The result was a crunchy, bright, pungent relish that went on everything: pinto beans, cornbread, black-eyed peas, pork chops. Chow Chow was the flavor multiplier of the poor kitchen. It turned bland food interesting and interesting food unforgettable. Every grandmother's recipe was different, and every grandmother believed hers was the only correct version. The jars lined cellar shelves like jewels, amber and green and gold, insurance against the monotony of winter meals. We replaced it with store-bought relish that tastes like sweet neon, and the loss is staggering. Number 8. Crackling bread. When your grandmother rendered lard from pork fat, the crispy golden bits left behind were cracklings. She did not throw them away. She stirred them straight into cornbread batter. The cracklings added pockets of salty, crunchy, porky richness throughout the bread, turning an ordinary side into something you could build a whole meal around. A skillet of crackling bread cost nothing extra because the cracklings were a byproduct of making lard, which she was already doing. The bread baked in the same cast iron skillet, greased with the same lard. Zero waste, maximum flavor. This was the bread that appeared at every supper table in the rural South, broken apart by hand and used to sop up pot liquor, gravy, or the juice from a plate of greens. We lost crackling bread when we stopped rendering our own lard and started buying Crisco. The cracklings disappeared, and so did the bread they made extraordinary. Number 7. Pot liquor. Speaking of greens, the liquid left in the pot after your grandmother cooked collard greens, turnip greens, or mustard greens was never, ever poured down the drain. That murky, dark, intensely flavored broth was pot liquor, and it was considered as valuable as the greens themselves. Rich in vitamins that leached from the leaves during cooking, seasoned with ham hock and salt and pepper, pot liquor was served in a cup alongside cornbread for dunking. Some families drank it straight as a tonic. Others sopped it up with biscuits until the bowl was dry. During the Depression, pot liquor and cornbread was sometimes the entire meal. The greens cost a dime a bunch. The ham hock was the cheapest cut at the butcher. The liquid was free, a bonus, pure nutrition extracted from food that had already done its job. We pour it down the sink now. Modern nutritionists would call that a crime. Before the movie made them famous, fried green tomatoes were simply what you made when frost was coming and the garden was still full of unripe fruit. Your grandmother sliced firm green tomatoes thick, dredged them in cornmeal and flour, and fried them in bacon grease or lard until the coating turned crispy and golden, while the inside stayed tart and firm. They were served hot, sometimes with a sprinkle of salt, sometimes with a drizzle of cane syrup in the deep South. The tomatoes were free from the garden. The cornmeal was pennies. The grease was already in the can on the stove. This side dish turned a problem: unripe tomatoes that would otherwise go to waste into something people actually looked forward to. That tart, crunchy, savory bite, alongside pinto beans and cornbread, was the taste of resourcefulness. We turned it into an appetizer at chain restaurants with fancy remoulade sauce and forgot that it was invented by women who could not afford to let a single tomato go to waste. Number 5. Creamed peas on toast. When your grandmother opened a can of early June peas, she did not just heat them up. She made a simple white sauce with butter, flour, milk, salt, and pepper. She stirred in the peas, and spooned the whole thing over a slice of toast. That was supper for the children on nights when the adults ate late or when the budget was stretched thin. A can of peas cost 8 cents in 1945. The butter, flour, and milk were pantry staples. The toast was yesterday's bread put to work. Creamed peas on toast was the side dish that became a whole meal when it needed to be, filling small stomachs with warm, creamy, simple comfort. Mothers served it without apology. Children ate it without complaint. It was the taste of Tuesday nights, ordinary and unremarkable, which is exactly why nobody wrote it down, and exactly why it disappeared without anyone noticing. After Sunday's ham was carved down to the bone, that bone did not go in the trash. It went into the biggest pot in the kitchen. Your grandmother covered it with water, added dried navy beans, a chopped onion, a few stalks of celery, salt, pepper, and let it simmer until the beans turned soft and the broth turned thick and smoky. A pound of navy beans cost a dime. The ham bone was free. The vegetables were pennies. This pot of soup lasted 3 days and fed the whole family as a main course or a hearty side. The marrow dissolved into the broth, making it rich and silky in a way no store-bought broth could match. Children soaked cornbread in it. Fathers ate it with crackers. Mothers reheated it each night, and each night it tasted better than the last. This was the dish that made a ham justify its price twice over. Number 3, skillet cornbread. Not the sweet, cakey, muffin tin cornbread that passes for cornbread today. Real cornbread. Your grandmother heated bacon grease in a cast-iron skillet until it smoked, poured in a batter of cornmeal, buttermilk, egg, salt, and a pinch of baking soda, and baked it until the bottom formed a crust so crispy it shattered when you cut it. Here is the science that modern kitchens cannot duplicate. When that wet batter hits smoking hot fat in seasoned cast iron, the Maillard reaction happens instantly on the bottom surface, creating a crust with a flavor profile that no amount of non-stick spray on an aluminum pan can reproduce. The buttermilk reacting with the baking soda produces carbon dioxide at the exact right moment, giving the bread its lift, while the cast iron distributes heat in a way that cooks the inside evenly without burning the crust further. Food scientists have tested this. The combination of seasoned iron, animal fat, and buttermilk leavened batter creates flavor compounds that simply do not form under any other conditions. A bag of cornmeal cost a dime. Buttermilk was the byproduct of churning butter. The bacon grease was free. Grandma made this every single day because it cost nearly nothing and went with every meal on this entire list. We replaced it with Jiffy Mix and lost something science is only now beginning to understand. Number 2, collard greens. A mess of collard greens simmering with a smoked ham hock was the heartbeat of the southern poor kitchen. Your grandmother bought greens for almost nothing, sometimes picked them from the garden after the first frost, which made them sweeter. She would strip the leaves from the tough stems, wash them in 3 changes of water to get the grit out, then pile them into her biggest pot with a ham hock, water, vinegar, salt, red pepper flakes, and a pinch of sugar. They simmered for hours, filling the house with a smell that was equal parts smoky, earthy, and deeply savory. The greens cooked down to a fraction of their original volume, turning silky and tender. A bushel that looked like it could feed an army reduced to enough to feed a family. The pot liquor beneath them was liquid gold. On New Year's Day, collard greens meant money in the coming year. Black-eyed peas meant luck. Cornbread meant gold. Together, they formed the most important meal of the year for families who needed all the fortune they could summon. We still eat collards, but we have forgotten how to cook them properly. Quick sautéed collards have their place, but they are not the same food as greens that simmered for 4 hours with a ham hock. Not even close. Pinto beans. If one side dish defined poor man's cooking in America, this is it. A pot of pinto beans simmered with salt pork, onions, and black pepper fed more American families through more hard times than any other dish in history. A 2-pound bag of dried pintos cost 15 cents during the Depression. It fed a family of 6 for 3 days. Your grandmother soaked them overnight, drained them, covered them with fresh water, added a chunk of salt pork or a ham hock, a quartered onion, and let them simmer all day until the beans turned creamy and the broth went thick. Served with cornbread for sopping and a side of raw onion, this was the meal that asked nothing and gave everything. In the hills of Appalachia, the hollows of the Ozarks, the small farms of East Texas, pinto beans were not a side dish. They were survival. Families ate them 5 nights a week and were grateful. The beans were cheap. The pork was the cheapest cut available. The labor was time itself, slow and patient and forgiving. You could leave them on the stove, go do chores, come back, and they would be better for the waiting. Pinto beans taught a generation that poverty did not have to mean hunger, that a pot on the stove and a pan of cornbread could hold a family together through anything. We have not entirely forgotten them, but we have forgotten what they meant. Here is my challenge to you. Try one of these this week. Just one. Try the Skillet cornbread in cast iron, the wilted lettuce with hot bacon grease, or the pot of pintos simmered with a ham hock. Then come back and tell me your grandmother was wrong. Tell me the frozen side dishes in your freezer taste better than what she made from a garden, a cast iron skillet, and 40 years of knowing exactly how to feed people who had nothing. I tested every single one of these. My kitchen has a bacon grease jar on the counter now. I fried green tomatoes last week, and my neighbor asked what smelled so good. I made poke salad and did not die. Share which one you are going to try in the comments, because these were never just side dishes. They were how families survived. And your grandmother knew something the grocery store does not want you to remember.